this is part 2 of measuring. This is refine the measurements. What I did in part 1 was I wanted to make sure that the proportions of the overall height and the overall width were accurate in relationship to my 1. So I'm using one component of my drawing to measure everything else. So it's the same thing as if I was using inches to measure something. I wouldn't switch from inches to feet. So I want to keep a single unit of measurement consistent throughout my drawing. Once I've established my overall height and width, I'm going to use the same one to look at each individual component or each individual part of my drawing. In other words, I'm going to measure how wide and tall the white box is. I already know that this is the height of the box, but now I need to measure the width of the box. Then I'm going to measure the Granger box. How tall is the Granger box and how wide is the Granger box? How tall is this little box on the left-hand side versus how wide? How tall versus how wide? So it's just a systematic check of each element as needed. So, take my 1, and I count that the white box is about 1.5 ones wide. So, here's my 1, I have 1, and that is right in the middle of my string. So that's 1.5. I would give you a little tip here. One of the things that I like to do is I like to take my 1 and put it on the side, almost like a ruler. So here's what I mean. Take my 1, I'm just going to draw it over here. That's the height, that's the bottom, okay? So, this is a whole 1. If I look at the middle, this or this is 1/2. If I look at the space between there, that's 1/4. So this is 1/4. Right? This is 1/2. And then if I look at this space, this is 3/4. 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and a whole 1. Why? Because if I measure something and it's, let's say, 1.5, right? I did this and I counted 1.5, and I want to see how 1.5 is in proportion in the scale of my drawing. I can simply take 1 and add 1/2 to that. So this is 1.5, which is the width of that box. So I can use this system to help me add to my 1. I'm going to measure the height of the Granger box. So again, make sure I'm in the right place. Take my 1, count. So I'm counting from here to here. I'm using the center line of the Granger box as a visual aid to help me measure the height. So what I'm doing visually is I'm doing this, I'm bringing it over here, and then counting how many of those 1s fit on that edge of the Granger box. So do it here, I get 1, 2, 3, 4. I get exactly 5. So now check to see that in my drawing, this is 5 ones tall. Take my 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that correction that I had made earlier actually fits perfectly. Okay? Because I had brought the bottom of the round box down. And regardless of whether I had made that correction before or not, this is more accurate. I've measured it, I've actually measured it. So this is now the corner, the bottom corner of the Granger box. Right here. Again, I can visually see that this is a little taller than that. Right, so my Granger box is accurate in height. I'm going to measure the width of the Granger box. Again, same thing. Take the one, I'm just going to go here to here. How wide is that? 2 and a little bit. So I have, again, I just want this to look like it did when I was seeing it visually. 2, and there's my little bit. So that's accurate. I know that this section of my drawing is accurate. Let's check this section. So I'm going to erase these lines to make it a little bit more visually clear for you. I'm going to check the height and width of that box. Again, take my 1, so I'm going over here and comparing that to this. And I get that the height is about the same. This is about the same as that. So take my 1. And I get about the same. So that's accurate. Good news. Let's check the width. Take the 1. Again, it's about 1.5. So this box is about the same size as that. Maybe a little narrower than a half. It's maybe about 1/3. So I have 1, okay, and 1/3 is just in between the half and the quarter. So there it is. All right. So this box looks like it's just a little narrow on my drawing. So what I need to do is I'm just going to move it left a hair. And I'm going to move it right a hair. And just check it again. I need about 1 1/3. Right now, I'm being pretty nitpicky about this. I'm trying to get this to be as accurate as I can. So that looks pretty good. All right. So, okay. Sometimes this can look very similar. So one of the things that I like to do is compare this side, the left side, to the right side, just visually. I don't need to use the 1 for this, but I want to have a measurable sort of comparison to see how I drew. So I'm going to just visually take the width up there and compare it. Right? Left side's width compared to the right side's width, and see how it looks. I'm not 100% sure visually about that. So I'm going to do it visually by using the string to frame the left side, and I'm going to compare the left side to the right side. And what I see through that measurement is that they're about the same. So what I really need to do is just split this in half. So here's a little trick. I know that this is how wide it is, right? And I need to find the half. So you just hold the string, and there's your half, right? So all that really needed to change was the center line needed to move left a little bit. Now you can do it visually, but sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to do visually. That is more accurate than my eye was able to see. So this is correct. This is correct. Last component is this bottom box, right? So I see the top of this box. So there is part of this box that's going to extend higher than that center corner. But for simplicity, I am simply going to measure from the top of that center edge to the bottom of the center edge. And the other part, I can draw that in a little bit later. So again, I'm going to take my 1. And I have 1, 2, and maybe just a hair taller. So this is what I saw. 1, 2, that's off, right? That looks taller in my drawing than I saw. So there's probably something here that needs to be changed. I know that this has to remain below this point, so I can't bring this up. If there's an error here, it probably has to do with the fact that I drew this box too high. So what I need to do here is, instead of measuring from this corner to here, I'm going to do the reverse. I'm going to measure from what I know to be my lowest point, because that point is fixed. And then I'm going to measure 2 and a little bit. And that will put this corner in a more accurate position, and then I'll just make the corrections to this small box. So I'm going to remeasure visually just to double check myself, and I always like to do that no matter what, just to make sure. So in this case, I'm going to measure from the bottom up, and I get 2. Do it again. 1, 2. What do you know? Maybe my finger is blocking it a little bit. All right, but it's pretty close. It's about 2 1/3. So let's go from here. 1, 2. That's 1/3 right there. So it's not bad. What probably happened is that I just overshot myself a little bit. This is actually pretty accurate. Okay. So no major catastrophes, no big changes so far. I am going to change or check the width of this box. So I'm going to take my 1. I get about 2 1/2. One thing that you want to keep in mind is a little bit of movement here is going to change, right? It can change from it appearing to be 2 1/2 to 2 1/4 or a little bit more. So it's always important to double check, but it's also important to use your eyes and help train your eyes. And if it looks correct, it being off by a little bit is not a big deal. We want this to be accurate as much as we can to the eye, and understanding that proportions are going to need to resemble this as much as possible in order for them to sort of mathematically fall into place when I'm trying to draw perspective. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to check that again. I said it was about 2 1/2. Let me double check it. 1, 2. I see 2 1/2 again, so that's a good sign. 1, 2, That is a half right there. So I know that not only is my entire drawing proportionally correct, but each individual component is also proportionally correct. The last thing that I want to check is the width of the left side of this box compared to the width of the right side of the box. That's the only thing that I haven't checked. And what I'm going to do, because this is bigger than my 1, right, is I'm going to use my 1 to measure this side and to measure that side. So I get about 1.5 widths here. 1.5. That's pretty accurate, which means that should fit. That should be 1. So, and it is. So every component of my drawing is now accurate. I want to mention one last tip about the 1. When I choose a 1, when I choose that unit to compare to everything else, I don't want to use something that is too big or too small. Ideally, you want this to fit maybe 4 to 7 or 8 times on its longest side. Because if it's too small, and let's say it repeats 10, 12 times, it's very easy to overshoot it or undershoot it visually. So you want that measurement to be big enough so that you can recognize it visually, right? And that way, you won't be struggling so much to make sure that as your hands move, you're returning your fingers to that component. This is the part that can be most difficult at times because it's very easy that as you move your hands, that you can overshoot it or undershoot it. So when I am looking at something, I am also trying to look at some kind of mark, some kind of smudge, some kind of reference that I see in my subject matter that allows me to pinpoint where my fingers land so that I can move my hands and my measurements as accurately as possible. So right now, this is proportionally accurate. What we're going to do next is start to establish where the angles and the perspective of each box and the whole picture are going to be drawn, or how they're going to be drawn.